All right, so I did the grid lines. I'll have to say okie dokie. So, okay, my friend Chris, remember I was saying that I couldn't figure out, wait a minute. Okay. All right, so we solved the okie dokie problem. I did the grid lines in the pale yellow because I don't want them to pop out because this is a very sensitive background. I don't want these lines to seep through if I did it too dark with a dark pencil. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to do watercolor. I got my watercolor set up here. And I'm going to start with her hair. I'm going to mix up a nice rich brown. I'm using black and burnt sienna mixture and probably a little bit of ultramarine. And I'm going to just do a very dark all over shape of her hair, which will have to do a lot of softening of edges because it's going to be very harsh, but this is how I'm going to start. All right, so I'm mixing up this dark color. I know the more dark I get on here, the less I'll have to do with the pastels. So I'm going to probably maybe even do it twice, let it dry and see how dark it dries. And I'm ignoring this funny little, what is it? She's got some kind of bow in her hair, but we'll get that later. So I just did my drawing with a burnt umber pencil. Okay, there's lots of pretty delicate hairs coming down here, which we'll get to later. Okay. And I'm going to mix a lighter version of that color, a little bit lighter. And I'm going to add some cerulean blue, which I don't use much, but I have it here on my palette. It's sort of, yeah, more of a charcoal-y kind of color. I'm going to paint the whole shape of her torso, with just kind of flat. Not looking at any of the lace that's on top of it. I'm ignoring that. It is absorbing the yellow pastel pencil line. I don't care about that. And this is obviously going to be a little tighter of an underpainting than you guys saw me do last week with the dappled light one. So just, you know, the underpainting can be very loose and abstract to very paint, you know, like I'm painting the painting with watercolors. So I'm not making any abstraction really here. I really like the shape of her kind of hip coming out there. Alrighty, then I'm gonna mix up a color for her back skin tone. I'm using a burnt sienna and a yellow ochre, a little bit of cad red. It's a very warm tone. There we go. Just treating it like one shape. Again, I always think in those puzzle pieces of how it fits together. Adding a little touch of alizarin over here. So with something like this, you know, your drawing skill definitely has to be up to snuff to pull this kind of thing off. And I spent many, many, many years in life drawing classes and workshops. I haven't done it a lot lately, but I love life drawing. I can't wait for the day when we can go back to life drawing sessions. Mixed up a little darker in here. I really am paying attention to the negative shape between her arm and her back. It's really pretty. I'm going to get a little darker on the inside of the arm there where it's in shadow, mixing up a little black into that mixture. I'm going to use the same over here on this side of her arm, the back side of her arm. Again, paying attention to that really pretty negative shape that really carves out her torso. All right, now I'm going to mix some a little bit lighter. I'm going to kind of go for the side of her face that's in shadow. This is where it gets tricky. It's going to have to be a lot of modeling with the pastels because this is going to be flat. Adding some more red, cad red, a little warmer up in the ear. I'm going to add, I have Chinese white, which is something I don't think a lot of watercolor painters use for a straight watercolor, but I'm using it in this situation for the, get some lighter skin tone, which is very subtle on here because it's covered with the lace shawl that she's wearing. It's kind of a cool, strange color because of the lace covering it, but we'll start with this. I'm going to flip to a smaller brush and I'm going to come in, I'm going to mix up a cad red, alizarin crimson and some white and a teeny tiny bit of cobalt to make it a little lavender-ish. Add a touch of cad yellow into it. I want to get a lighter, warmer, it's not light enough, color for that, where the soft light is hitting the front of her face. And I'm going to go back a little darker for the kind of shadow in the eye socket. And a little darker even with my little brush. It's going to kind of indicate the eyelash, you know, that she's looking down, so it's mostly eyelashes that I see. And some of the eyebrow. When I'm doing little details, you can kind of, I have this habit of just kind of resting my, I kind of always leave my fingernail on my left hand, being that I'm left-handed, a little long, so I could use just the tip of my fingernail as like a brace if I have to get some tiny details. I'm just going to get a little bit of dark indication of the inner parts of that ear that I painted as one blob. And some kind of soft reddish color, get a little bit in there, the base of the nose and her lips. All right, now just going to cover up some of these white spots that I missed down here. Oops, too dark. Oops, still too dark. Come on. Okay. Just because they're a little distracting to me. Right now, now what? Now what? Get a little bit of warm up here on the top of her hair. And I'm going to mix up, I'm going to wipe this palette off a little bit with my paper towel where I've been mixing. I want to mix up a very soft, light, bluish gray for the background. Yeah. So this will be the kind of situation in the background where I probably won't have to put a lot of pastel if I get the colors I like and the values I like back there. That's my thinking. So I'm using cobalt blue and ultramarine blue and a teeny touch of alizarin to mix up this background color. It's picking up the yellow pencil that I grid lines a little bit, but that's okay. It's kind of cool. All right, we're almost there. I think I'm going to go over her torso one more time because it dried a little bit lighter than I wanted it to. Okay, I'm going to mix up that mixture again with a little alizarin, some black, some cobalt blue. There we go. I should dry a little darker. All right, just about there. Let it dry. Just doing another layer on the hair too. All right. We will pause. All right, so the watercolor is dried and I'm going to come back in. I actually sharpened my pencils. I'm really jealous of Ed's pretty cool system that he came up with, but I actually pulled out my pencil sharpener, my electric one, and it didn't eat up any of my pencils this morning, so I'm very happy about that. And I'm looking for one pencil that I want, this dark brown. There it is. I'm going to switch over to my iPad because my eyes are not what they used to be. And I can't see this little thing enough. That's really sad. But I'm going to switch over to my iPad so I can see her face better. Excuse me, here we go. Yes, now I can see. All right. Yeah, I'll never be, I would never be, I just can't see like that anymore. My eyes don't want to let me. All right, I'm coming into the center of interest, which is her beautiful, lovely face. I have pulled out some of my favorite pastel pencils. There's two pencils. I'll put this in the email too, because people ask me this often. I have many different brands of pastel pencils, and they're all good. There's just some of my standard favorites in certain brands that have really good flesh tones that I like when I do stuff like this detail kind of stuff, portrait stuff. I just can't get in there, and this is a small painting too. I mean, this is 9 by 12, so it's small. So I'll put the numbers of the brands that I like in the follow-up email, so you'll know, because they're really my standards and I use them a lot when I do something like a subject like this. And my new pastels. There's the hard pastels, which I'm going to use a lot in the beginning here on her face, maybe entirely between pencils and hard pastels. I don't want to get too heavy of a layer on here at this point. I'll pick up other colors when I'm working in other areas back into my soft pastels. But we're going to stick with the pencils a lot for the little details on her face. You kind of hear the scratchy scratch. There are areas, this is a kind of a pale blue color that's going to indicate that highlight on her forehead and a little bit in here, which is not a pencil, but I'm going to indicate that so I can kind of key my values accordingly. I sometimes like to stick in a highlight way in the beginning, even though I know I might not leave it there, I might take it out, but it helps me see the values around it. And it lets me know if I'm getting my darks dark enough around in the shadow areas. And I think I've said this in other paintings, but I feel like when I get my center of interest to a really good point, the rest of the painting just falls into place. So I spend, it seems like a lot of time in this little area, but it really helps me finish the whole rest of the painting. I learned that from Richard Schmid. The theory was if I get one thing right, then everything will be right around it. If I do this area wrong, and then the whole thing's going to end up wrong. And I'm coming down here, I'm going to go into the nostril. Kind of look at the shape of the cheek here. So I'm looking from the bottom of this eyelid, which is very dark shadow under here, kind of crawling my way around down to this wing of the nostril to get that distance correct. And then I'm going to come in under the lip. It's got this beautiful shape of her silhouette of her lip. And I'm picking up this almost white, pale pink pencil. I'm going to kind of almost use it, I'm using it like for the negative shape around her lip. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this demo trying to get her likeness, because that's something that I love to do, and it's a big challenge, but it's going to take me some time. And I want to get to the lace and all that stuff. So I'm just going to kind of do a brief outline of it, knowing that I'll probably have to come back in and modify it a little bit and tune it up, so to speak. I mean, it's not a commission, so I know sometimes I get hung up. It's like, it doesn't have to, she's not paying me to do a portrait of her. So I always have to keep telling myself, just make it so it looks pretty. It doesn't have to exactly look like her. But that won't stop me from obsessing about it. All right, let's see, let's do a little bit in here. The bottom lip has to come out a little bit more. Still mostly using just all hard pastels and pencils at this point. Now I'm going to want to get the swoop of her this hair coming in. I like that shape a lot. Again, I know where the watercolor stopped. There's kind of hard edges. I'm going to have to pay attention to those edges and soften them as I go. And I have a pretty strong kind of rosy pink here, and I'm going to interject some blue into it, cool it off a little bit. And then I'm going to take a pencil, kind of blend it. And again, I can use the pencil if I want to warm up an area or if I want to cool an area down. It depends on what pencil I pick up to get the effect that I want. Okay, this is a very, very pale, it's not white, but it's a kind of a blue white. And I'm going to use to really accentuate her silhouette. And that was a soft pastel. And these are harder. You probably already know this, but they're, the softer the pastel, the harder it is to control. So that's why I kind of start with my hard and work up to my soft. All right, moving on. We're not going to spend a lot of time. You get the idea there. I'm going to see a little bit on her chin. There's going to have to be some very delicate work inside there. Let's see if I can see that in here. I like that look. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on down to the shoulder. I have this kind of soft pink hard pastel. want to soften some of these edges back here first. Okay, now there's this really interesting like outline of the lace on the shawl. It's gonna kind of, I ignored it when I was doing the underpainting on purpose. I just wanted to get the skin, like the whole layer of skin, and put the shawl on top of it. That's like thinking in layers. It's too dark. All right, let's see. Da, 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 da. Okay. Oh. All right, now we're going to see, what I'm going to do a little bit, what am I going to do? This is hard. All right, but I can do it. I'm going to attempt to do some of this lace on the back. Oh, that's too light. Yeah, see, sometimes I have to pick up a color. I mean, a lot of times yeah, that's what I want. Sometimes I pick it up and it's not right. Sometimes it is. I'm going to make this a little darker back here, like we're in between her shoulder blades. It's a little darker than, kind of comes out a little bit. It's very subtle, but I can see it in the photo. Let me get that in there. I'm going to find the color I want. I had to get the color underneath this pattern on the lace first. So if I can get the color underneath first, then I can start to indicate that lacy feeling, you know, the pattern of the lace. Way. I'm going to kind of accentuate. I love how this kind of sparkles on behind her, makes her torso just stand out. I'm picking up my charcoal now, right over this torso. It's got some warm tones on it, so I'm picking up a red pencil very lightly, very lightly. The charcoal seems just the right value and just the right amount to get this a little darker, moving down her back. Very soft edges because the lace is making everything foggy. And continue down. Again, I'm going to indicate the pattern here. And there's this catching the light of this thing here, a little bit on here. One element that I have to really watch here is to keep these edges, everything's going to be super, super soft underneath that lace. Let's see down here. And there's these folds of the material. I'm using the direction of my strokes to kind of pull it down like I did with the waterfall on the other demo. Same kind of a thinking. And I love the look of the lace. Oh, it's interesting. I haven't painted a lacy thing in a long time. If you look at some of my older Chicago paintings, I used to have my sisters. I have 3 younger sisters and their friends, and I get them all dressed up in pretty dresses and hats. And I had this whole series called Women in Hats. A lot of lace. It's dark, but it's soft back here. All right, I'm going to stop for a minute and come and chit chat. Yeah, so as far as the gridding of it all, you've seen like the demo I did last week. I barely even touched the paper with the pencil. I had a few quick lines and then I went right into it because that was the nature of that subject matter. This obviously, a whole nother animal, and I did a lot more grid lines and I spent a lot more time drawing it because of the nature of the subject. So you have this tool being the grid lines and you can use it how you need it. I mean, I always recommend that you pick subjects where your drawing isn't going to hinder your skill level. Like this is not a beginner's subject. This is a subject for someone that's had some experience with life drawing, figure drawing, portraiture. And otherwise, you can grid from here till eternity and you're going to be frustrated. So pick accordingly. And not everybody has the same aspirations and not everybody has the same goals for their art. Like I know Marie really wants to, since she came to study with me, has wanted to get better at portraits. I know that other people, that's not their goal. And that's just fine. So just pick accordingly so that you can enjoy what you're doing and not live in utter frustration. All right, I'm gonna do a little more on the fabric because and the hair. I'm gonna just indicate a little bit of shape up here. Not a lot. I'm not gonna focus a lot on the hair even when in the finished painting because it's kind of like not important. It's, she's looking down and it's just that whole feeling of her looking down and really the lace. And what will I do in the background? That is the question of the day. This is a very pale, kind of gray-white, hard pastel. It'll be one thing I'll use. Here's a little more purpley, a little darker. So I'm going to vary the background. It's going to be very pale. There's more of a pink. I don't know how well it's showing up. You know what? I have to. There we go. Oops. Ah. Okay, there's some really interesting stuff that happens where the lace and the background meet. Work on this arm a little bit because it's kind of interesting how the light hits the lace on that side of her arm. Again, pressure is another tool, because if I take this little piece of mauvey pastel and I'm lightly skating over this area, and if I press, I get a whole different darker value. So that's another learned thing about pressure on when you're applying your pastels. And that comes with just doing it and trying out different ways of applying it, different marks, different strokes, different angles. It's sort of like a musician, how to play your instrument sort of thing. Not that I play an instrument, but I guess it's like that. I used to play an instrument. Okay, this is fun over here. This is interesting colors and shapes. That's too strong. I don't like it that. See if I can get that feeling of that lace coming down her arm. It's kind of tricky. Picking up my charcoal again, I want to just kind of mellow out this warm tone on the inside of her arm, just very lightly. All right, let's see if we can get that feeling of little lace coming and hitting the light. Comes like a little paisley pattern. And then it really catches some light. This is a soft pastel. Really catches some light up here. It catches a really pretty little hit of light up here. Kind of, there's an edge, but no edge. It's very strange and very pretty where this edge meets the background. It's sort of, when you squint, you can see it, but when you stare at it, it's interesting. You can still see it when you squint, so I know it's there, but and this just kind of comes around and it loses the edge. And then the pattern kind of hits some light down here. Comes into here. And there's kind of a sharp, that fold comes. I don't want to make it sharp all the way, but I'm going to accentuate it a little bit and then fuzz it out a little bit. I'm taking the same pencil up in here. I'm going to soften all this down. Back to my charcoal. Charcoal is a good friend of pastels. All right, that's kind of cool. I'm going to just soften this whole area with this pencil because it just looks like it needs it. Just has that feeling of a veil over it. So everything has to kind of get really soft. All right, I think we're going to get some stuff going on in here where it gets real shadowy. But you can still see the pattern a little bit. And what else? This shoulder is bothering me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to come back because I think my drawing got a little tweaky. I'm going to come back with my pencil and just kind of re-look at this. This shoulder just got weird. So let's get rid of it. Let's not use that. Let's use this. Yeah, I just keep out of the corner of my eye. I keep seeing that boo-boo. That looks better. So still needs some work, but that's the kind of subject this is. It's going to need a lot of looking and re-looking. And let's go back up in here for a minute. Oops. Okay, that's not. That looks like another boo-boo. All right, we'll fix it. I'll fix it later. Ah. Okay. Okie dokie, huh? Okay.